Hey friends, today we're talking to Dr. Will Cole all about his new book called Gut Feelings. And we're talking all about the mind-body connection, but you're taking it a step further and we're learning so much today that what's going wrong inside our bodies, even if we're eating all the right things and doing all the right things, there's this emotional component, right?
Absolutely. I mean, shameflammation is something that I see play out in patients' lives every day. And we have to realize that things like chronic inflammation, hormonal problems, fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, oftentimes, yes, there's a physiological component of it when it comes to foods and understanding how foods impact our mood. But it's not just about what we're feeding our body. What are we feeding our head and our heart? And shameflammation is definitely a food that doesn't love us back.
You're going to learn that and so much more in just a moment. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Squad, it's gonna be a great day. Want to know why? Because when you know better, you get better. And that's what we do here every single day. And we're going to do it together because we're better together. Our quote of the day, friends, comes from our guest today. I'm so excited to have him in studio. Your health is an investment, not an expense. Let's hear that one more time. Your health is an investment, not an expense. That's from Dr. Will Cole. And he is chatting with us today all about his new book called Gut Feelings. Welcome back to all of you in the squad. Hope you guys are having a great day. For anybody who is new to the show, welcome. You're now officially a Heal Squad member. If you haven't left us a review, friends, we will put it in the summary below, a little link to make it easy. Help us out. Let us know how we're doing and share that with us. And if you love this episode after you listen to it, which I think you're going to, please share it with a friend. We want to get this to as many people as possible, and we want to share the good word. And Dr. Will Cole has a lot of good words to share with us. A little bit about Will. He is a leading functional medicine expert who specializes in clinically investigating underlying factors of chronic diseases and customizing a functional medicine approach for thyroid issues, autoimmune conditions, hormonal imbalances, and digestive disorders as well. He's the host of the Art of Being Well podcast and the New York Times best-selling author of Intuitive Fasting. Today, we're going to be talking all about his book, like I said, Gut Feelings and Shameflammation, and so much more. Before we get to that, friends, Macy's is a huge supporter of this show, and we're so grateful to them. Check out my link, macys.com/Heal Squad. I have a curated list of gifts and all kinds of amazing things that I've found on that website, things that I'm wearing every day that you may like. So anything you buy from there supports the show. Thank you, of course, in advance for your help with that. And now on to my conversation with Will Cole. Dr. Will Cole, thanks for being back with us. New
Thanks
book,
for having me.
Gut
Thank you.
Feelings. I'm really excited to get into this. It's healing the shame-fueled relationship between what you eat and how you feel. What does that mean?
It's born out of my day job. It's running the telehealth clinic here and seeing people for the past 13 plus years, 10 hours a day. You get to know people and you get to know the intricate confluence of factors when you're dealing with autoimmune problems and hormonal problems and metabolic issues and brain health issues. The fact that mental health is not separate from physical health, that mental health is physical health. And I'm really talking about the connection between the two, the bidirectional relationship between the two, and how we have to look at both and not either or. And
Yes.
shame is and the things that cause shame, like unresolved trauma and chronic stress, will impact our health just as much as a food that doesn't love us back.
You know, when I have coached people through brain surgeries and cancers and different things behind the scenes, because after all the stuff that's happened to me, people always ask me for advice and help. And so I've kind of created a little protocol. I'm a fake doctor, but I'm always like, this is the advice I can give you based on what we did. One of the biggest parts that I end with is, so what's the emotional component that you haven't dealt with? Because I know that the emotional becomes physical. I
Yeah.
know that it's those traumas inside of us that are stored that are creating tumors or illnesses, or the way we're vibrating is creating an autoimmune condition. I believe that, but you have now the science to back it all up. You have the clinical experience to back it all up. So can you share a little bit about that that connection from a statistical standpoint so that people know it's not just woo-woo?
Yeah, not at all. And I think science is really just catching up with what humans would have known anecdotally, intuitively throughout human history. We knew somehow that the gut was the seat of the soul, and you hear these cliches in our culture, like gut feelings or gut instincts, or just feel it in my gut, or butterflies in my stomach. That really, we know now that 75% around that of our immune system is made in the gut, is originating from the gut. Inflammation is a product of the immune system. So to really understand the combination of variables when you're dealing with chronic inflammatory health problems, you really have to look at the gut-centric components there. And the fact that things like stress, when you're looking at chronic stress, it's implicated in the most common chronic diseases we're facing as a society. When you look at heart disease and different types of cancer, you're looking at autoimmune problems, metabolic issues, type 2 diabetes, stress is implicated in every single one of those. So we have to look at stress and what that even means. And something that I talk about in the book, I call it shameflammation. It's how things like shame and the things that drive shame, like unresolved trauma and chronic stress, are really, as you mentioned, literally stored in the body. It's impacting something called methylation, which is this big interconnected pathways, series of pathways that impacts inflammation levels, that impacts detoxification, that impacts the way that neurotransmitters are produced and signaled in the body. So it is profoundly important, and we have to look at it. But it's a lot more to unpack, right? It's more prescriptive and linear for me to say, okay, these foods have been shown to do and support X, Y, and Z. Have more of those, have less of the foods that have been shown to raise inflammation. It is a lot more complex and nonlinear to say, well, don't have stress, right? Don't have shame, don't have that unresolved trauma. That's more work and more time and more complex topics to cover. But it's something that I really wanted to tackle in the book, because I see people kept back. They're eating all the right foods, but they're serving their body a big slice of shame and stress and unresolved trauma every day. That's perpetuating those labs that I'm not seeing improve the way that I want them to do.
Yeah. Let me take one quick moment, Kelsey, make sure everybody gets out safely with that gate. I really want to get into shameflammation because, and I want to understand, because for anybody who's listening and they hear stress has such a big role in our illnesses, now we know that's also in our control, right? How we think and how we feel is a big determinant of what's going on inside of our bodies. So that means we have choices. But that's really hard to wrap your head around, right? Like, I'm in a critical moment right now where I'm healing from this pancreas surgery and splenectomy and all the other things that happened. And I know stress is a really big issue, but I can't seem to help myself sometimes. I still go down that rabbit hole, even knowing what I've just gone through. And then I beat myself up about it, which I know is really bad. I'm shaming myself. And as I said to you earlier, slow down. The message keeps coming to me to slow down. I don't know how to. So for those of us who don't know how to stop the stress, how to slow down, how to not shame ourselves, how do you advise and what do we do?
In each person's ability to handle stressors, right? And I talk in the book about physiological stressors and psychological stressors and how both will impact something called the neuroimmunoendocrine axis. It's the intersection between our nervous system, our immune system, i.e. inflammation in part, and the endocrine system, our hormonal pathways.
Basically, all of my stuff.
Right. I mean, so many, right? So many people. And they have dysregulated levels of all of them, right? They're in a hyper vigilant state, and then neuroimmunoendocrine axis is showing up in their symptoms. They have the chronic health problems. They have that wired and tired, anxious and exhausted. And you're right. It's like, what do I even do with this feeling side of gut feelings. Like maybe they focus on the food, they're dealing with the nutrition, they're working out. They got the physiological stuff down pretty good.
That's how I
Uh,
feel.
right. But the feeling stuff
That's why
is
this book spoke to me because I was like, wait, I have been doing all the right things in the physical realm. And I was also on such a good track with the meditations. It got a little wonky after a few diagnoses, I can't lie.
hmm
So
yeah.
yeah, so yeah, what do you do?
So yeah, and it's I think first of all, give yourself grace through the times where things are in a season of upheaval and you're kind of have to deal with a lot. It's not beating yourself up for not having it all together. It's okay to cry. It's okay to worry. It's okay to figure things out and process things and metabolize it in a way and let the dust settle a little bit. And people in the throes of whatever we're talking about, some stressful life event, some season of their life that's stressful, they compound that stress and anxiety because they feel like they have to have it all together. But it's okay to be imperfect and be human and figure things out and process it. So there should be a grace and a lightness, I think, for ourselves and being easy. And something that I talk about in the book is the science of self-compassion, which it's sometimes not doing more. It's not doing the next thing. It's actually doing less and showing yourself some self-compassion, which lowers inflammation. So it's just a matter, I can't do it all right now. There's this study that I talk about in the book where they have people do math and public speaking,
I
which
saw that.
stresses a lot of people out. It spikes inflammation. They had higher interleukin-6 levels because they were stressed. They didn't have it all together. There was shame and embarrassment, maybe, amongst these things. But people that practice self compassion had the lowest interleukin-6 levels, the lowest inflammation levels. And the more that they practiced self compassion, showed themselves some grace, they had lower inflammation levels. So sometimes it's not the big, complicated protocol where they have to go and do some detailed advanced meditation technique. Sometimes it's just practicing self-compassion, and we don't do enough of that. Many people are so hard on themselves of not having it all figured out. And then from there you can lean into it. I talk about the science of breath work and EMDR therapy to really metabolize these stored stressors and traumas in the body.
And then that eventually will help us. Let's talk about shameflammation. I thought that was a really cute way to connect the two things so that we have a word for it. What is shameflammation?
So it's the impact that our emotions have on our physiology, on our biochemistry. So it's something that I see play out in patients' labs a lot, where people, as I mentioned earlier, they eat clean, they're eating foods that love them back for the most part, but you look at their inflammation levels and it's high. You look at their hormonal issues and it's not getting to where we want it to be. Their cortisol rhythms all over the place. Their estrogen, maybe excess estrogen levels in the body, or their thyroid levels are sluggish. This is that neuroimmunoendocrine axis that I see all too often in a dysregulated state, where we look at food, we look at nutrition as eating in alignment with ways that are supportive of that regulation of that system, right? Supportive of gut health, supportive of that parasympathetic aspect of their autonomic nervous system, which is not the healthiest typically. People that I see, and many people that are listening to this, have what researchers refer to as poor vagal tone, meaning the vagus nerve is the largest cranial nerve in the body. It's responsible for that resting, digesting, hormone balanced state. So when you hear the term regulated nervous system, or I have a dysregulated nervous system, what they typically mean is an overactive sympathetic fight or flight stress state and an underactive resting digestive parasympathetic state. So a lot of what we do in functional medicine is, and why I called the book this, gut and feelings, the physiological gut and the psychological, the mental, emotional, spiritual. We have to deal with both sides of that coin. So shameflammation is the feeling side of gut feelings. And how do I really not just focus what I'm feeding my body, but what am I feeding my head and my heart? What am I really cultivating? So shameflammation, the antidote to shameflammation at its most elementary level is self-compassion. When someone has self-compassion, it crowds out the shame. And it's easier said than done. I know that. But it's cultivating these practices when things do go crazy for a little bit, you have this resilience you have this anchoring yourself in the present moment where you're not rattled as much. You can still be rattled. We're all human, but you'll be less thrown to the wind.
Did you always have self-compassion?
No, no, not at all.
How did you
It's something,
cultivate it?
it's practicing these tools that I talk about in the work. There's a practice of that they actually prescribe in Japan and South Korea. The term is Shinrin-yoku. It's forest
Forest
bathing.
bathing. I
Yeah.
know.
It's really using nature as a meditation and a medicine. And the research shows it's lower stress hormones, that more balanced immune system, healthier, more regulated neuroimmunoendocrine axis. So for me personally, it's breath work. I talk about holotropic breath work in the book. It
What's
is the
holotropic breath work?
it's the breath work that's was researched out of the same researchers that looked at psychedelics and how psychedelics worked. And it really is a more enhanced, very visceral experience when it comes to breath work. You feel it all over in your body, and it allows your body to really clear out stored stress and trauma in the body. And it is a way to strengthen that vagus nerve. So it is a very effective way to do it.
I wonder if there's research behind singers and their health due to the vagal nerve, because I know we had Dr. Lippman on a long time ago talking about the vagus nerve and
Mhm.
how to activate it, and singing is a way to activate it. So I
Yeah.
try to sing in the shower in the morning so that I'm constantly thinking vagal nerve, vagal nerve. So is there any research that off the top of your head you've ever heard of? Because I'm curious. I feel like they would have a
Yeah.
leg up on the rest of us who aren't singing all the time.
Right. No, I think it's probably there's so many components as to why music specifically is therapeutic and healing to us. But for the listener, right? I mean, the actual vibrations, the experience of music. But I would assume that singers, and that's why different somatic practices, though, even involved humming and singing and chanting and drumming, all have effective tools. They may not even know it that they're exercising their vagus nerve, but it's probably why it's a source of joy and passion and comfort and healing for many of them. And they don't know the mechanisms, but they just know intuitively this is something healing to me.
Yeah, I marked something here um, about the shameflammation, and you said, I've seen the way that negative thoughts and emotions can subtly and systematically sabotage health in much the same way as inflammation can. In fact, I see this phenomenon of emotional suffering causing physical suffering so often that I've given it its own name, shameflammation. And you talk about how it's different, it presents differently. So, for people who are trying to kind of figure out how it's presenting, you talk about being anxious, feeling overwhelmed, hopeless, aimless, totally disconnected from our intuition. Um, and one of the other things that I really thought was interesting, because I felt this too recently, you said, when something goes awry with your body or your health, big or small, how do you feel? The answer is probably a mixture of anger, fear, and maybe even some embarrassment. That sounds like shame to me. I think we're all still trying to even get our heads around what shame really is. But when I started reading kind of the symptoms, right? I feel overwhelmed a lot. I feel anxious. There's some of those that really resonated with me. So I was like, okay, shameflammation. We've got something we've got to work on now with,
Mhm.
some practitioner, but also the embarrassment. I mean, I felt that recently with my recent diagnoses. I'm like, God, people are going to think that I'm just this fragile, sick person, but I'm
Mhm.
not. I'm very vibrant. I know I'm healthy. Just some things have been, you know, festering and happening. And, you
Mhm.
know, um, it was not an easy journey taking care of my mom. And this has been in there for a minute, they
Mhm.
said. So I have to attribute it to a few different things. I think COVID also helped. But, but yeah, I feel like I felt shame with the
Mhm.
diagnosis, and it was hard for me to even come out about it. I never
Mhm.
heard that before, that other people felt that.
Yeah, it is. It's ubiquitous and not enough people. I think you were extremely brave to even share your story. Many people go through things behind closed doors and they don't share it. So I think you have no idea how many people you're helping. I'm hearing about it on a clinic level already,
Wow.
that telehealth patients that are maybe I recommended a scan, I recommended a specific lab, and they didn't see it that important, right? Why do I have to do this? And through you sharing your story, you are going to save lives. So, I mean, and that's what I mean. So many people, when you talk about shame, when it comes to health shame, or shame about their body, or they are stressed out, so they put it off. They put it on the back burner. I'm busy. I don't have time for that test. I don't have time for that lab, or I don't want to spend my money on that lab. Um, the reality is these things are important, and many people have a lot of body related shame, health related shame, and hopefully we can bring some normalization to these conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Um, with shameflammation, if you're recognizing these symptoms in yourself, is there, I think you mentioned EMDR as a therapy. Are there other therapies that people can turn to for help with it? Because sometimes these things are too big for us. We're so
Hmm.
busy, right? It's hard enough to get people to focus on their health, Will. Like to
Hmm.
now try to tackle my health and something that I feel like is innate in me, right? I have a hard time managing my stress. I have a hard time slowing down, all of these things where I'm overwhelmed right now. And I have a
Hmm.
lot of tools under my belt and I have a lot of therapy under my belt. The average person with less resources and less time is sinking.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think there some people's in it's always different. I mean, if you're talking about that bidirectional gut and feelings. For some people, the feeling stuff, I'm thinking of a patient I talked to recently where she had a high ACE score, which is adverse childhood experience or events, things like sexual abuse, physical abuse, just neglect growing up. On top of that, a stressful work life, right now, a stressful job. And I brought up the unresolved trauma, shameflammation component for her. And she was let me know very clearly, I'm not ready to deal with this right now. And it's in the past. And why are you asking me that, basically? So for her it was more of the physiological side. Like she thought the functional medicine guy was going to say, work on gut health and take these supplements and more the linear stuff, which we did and we do, but it's still just one side of the coin. But for her, it's a good example for somebody to just, what's your in to lean in and be consistent with something that's going to love you back so you can get your head above water.
Mm.
So for her, it was focusing on some of the recipes that I talk about in the book, like soups and stews. I talk about what's called a GAPS protocol, which is an acronym that stands for gut and psychology or gut and physiology syndrome, depending on how you use it. But it's supporting the gut brain axis. So it's supporting gut health, lowering inflammation levels. So when you have less inflammation in your body, when you're eating foods that love you back, you are more centered, you are more grounded, you can make more proactive and less reactive decisions. So for some people, maybe it's just eating foods that love you back and focusing on nourishing grounding soups and stews, the more of the nutrition stuff that I talk about in the book. And then you can get your head around these more complex stuff, or maybe the stuff that you are overwhelmed with. And for some people, the nutrition stuff overwhelms them and they much rather deal with the feeling stuff. So I want people to lean into what they're ready to do and cross the bridge they're ready to do to cross. But the amazing thing about the feelings stuff, the mind body, the mental, emotional, spiritual things that impact our physical health, most of it's completely free. Most of it's completely either free or low cost, accessible things. They may be new. They may be a little bit weird sometimes because it's not something that they're used to doing. But things like breath work, getting out in nature, many somatic practices, they are free other than your time. They are just arts and practices that you have to cultivate and learn. And that's the amazing advantage of the time that we live in. There's a lot of low cost free things online on YouTube that we implement different protocols in patients' lives. There's one called DNRS, if you've heard of that. There's one called Primal Trust, these are
Never heard of
low
any of
cost.
these.
Yeah, so DNRS stands for Dynamic Neural Retraining System, I believe. And Primal Trust is similar to DNRS, but these are online programs that are pretty low cost things that they will teach you with video classes how to teach yourself breath work, teach yourself somatic practice, teach yourself ways to strengthen that vagus nerve. So yeah, you could be anywhere. You don't have to be in LA or New York to get access to these things. And then we're in telehealth. We're in Western Pennsylvania, and we help people with these things around the world. So you really can lean into this stuff. And even if you don't have access to, online, books talk about these practices too, like my book.
Yeah, I think
distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or mariamenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.